I found this map on a website which said that it had fascinating historical maps on it. You had to study it and try and predict what the map was actually showing. So I looked at it and had no idea. Maybe you have an idea. Have a think about it. What it turned out to be was a map of all the countries that Britain has either gone to war with or invaded over the last 500 years. All the countries in red. The vast majority of the world, at some point in the last 500 years, Britain has either invaded or gone to war with. And in doing so, the British built the biggest empire the world has ever known. It's an example of echoes in history. The empire doesn't exist anymore, yet we still live with the echoes of the British Empire in our life, in our country, in the world we live in. It links back to the studies that you've already undertaken this year. The Industrial Revolution in Britain, we already know, turned Britain from a rural society where everyone lived in the country and everyone farmed, through to an industrialized country where factories replaced farms. What came out of these factories were manufactured goods. These manufactured goods were sent all over the world. Everyone wanted what Britain made. Britain in the 19th century became known as the workshop of the world. Something like 95% of all manufactured goods on the planet were produced in this country. That process that started here, driven by the coal in the ground that heats the water, that was then converted through engines into steam power. What started here is now going on in the rest of the world to this day. The rest of the world is catching up. But what that gave this country, this small, wet group of islands off the coast of Europe, was a massive advantage. It gave Britain wealth, and that wealth was turned into power. And what the British did with that power was conquer the world. Here's an example of empires throughout history. Not a very clear one, but if you look at it briefly, you'll see. Some empires here last a long time and they were quite big. But the one that goes off the scale on this page is the British Empire. It lasted for around 300 years. At its height, 1 in 5 of the world's population were ruled by the British. It goes a long way to explain why Britain is the country it is in the world today. Now, despite that first map showing all the countries that Britain invaded, these are the countries that Britain actually permanently took over. Those that are in pink and those that are in orange. As you can see, the British Empire was in every continent of the planet, from Canada in the north to Guyana in South America, all the way from Egypt to South Africa could be travelled without once leaving British territory. Australia and New Zealand, India, the most populous country in the world at the time, all ruled by the British, and that doesn't include what became the United States, which was originally founded by the British and was part of the British Empire. Those 13 stripes in its flag are the first 13 colonies founded by the British, and if you look at their names, you will see their British origins from New York to New Hampshire, to Georgia, named after King George, and the Carolinas, named after King Charles. The British Empire and the British people turned out to be the greatest empire builders in history. What we are going to do over the next couple of weeks is study the British Empire, understand what reasons there were for creating it, what it did for the British, and also the reasons why the British no longer have that empire. But now let's speculate. Have you ever wondered why so many other countries in the world speak English? I mean, it's not the easiest language in the world to learn, but they all speak it. You ever wondered why so many countries also drive on the left-hand side of the road, and why the Union Jack appears in around 20 other flags in the world? Did you realise that our Queen is also queen of 27 other countries around the world. She's not just the queen of the United Kingdom. You ever wondered why our sports and our cultures are used all around the world? And finally, why so many of us have family living in places such as Canada, Australia, or South Africa? It's all because of the British Empire. And the British Empire was built mainly during the 19th century, when Britain was at the height of her industrial, military, and financial power. So what does the word empire mean? Well, the word empire is a large collection of countries all ruled by one other country. In this case, it was Britain, but you might be aware of the Roman Empire. The French had an empire. The Italians and the Germans had empires, but none of them on the size or the scale of the British. Sounds cozy, doesn't it? Well, it's not really, because most of the time those countries don't want to be ruled by the British. He's just sent his soldiers over here to take over. He's happy, but what about everyone else? And that's taken from the horrible history book on the British Empire. Imagine what it must be like. You've lived in your house all your life and enjoyed it. You're sitting at home one day when in marches a bunch of soldiers and they say, "Hello, we've come here to take over your country, your town, your street." Who says you can do that? My gun says I can do it. And that's how it was with the British. The Brits just marched into somebody's country and said, "We're in charge." It was that easy. The Industrial Revolution had made Britain the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world. The world was ripe for the picking. Now we're in charge, you will work for us, pay us taxes, supply us with slaves, and die fighting for us. Thanks, is the response, but what's in it for us? Well, first, I don't shoot you, and second, you have the honour of being part of the great British Empire. I'm not too sure if this is a great deal. But that's what we did, from one part of the world to the next. In fact, it was famously said of the British Empire that it was an empire on which the sun never set. When the sun was going down on one part of the empire, the sun was rising on another. Some people would rebel against the British, some succeeded, like the Americans, and some failed, like the Indians. Others welcomed the British, whilst millions of Brits moved to other countries in the empire. Either way, lots of people died horribly. In fact, the history of the British Empire is full of horrible people and horrible deeds, murder, exploitation, genocide, and slavery. Of course, this is the author's interpretation. In history, your job is to make up your mind as to whether the quote above is correct.